Hey guys, and welcome back to part 2 of the Pokemon GBA cartridge legit or fake game series. Today we will be looking at the sort of external or the physical signs of or the differences between the real and fake Pokemon games. So we'll have a look at some of the fake games and we'll have a look at some of the real games, and then we'll compare the older fakes with the newer fakes as well as the real ones, and then we'll have a quick look at also the differences between the different regions. So for example, Australia, Europe, and the USA. Alright, so before we start looking at the differences between the games, let's have a look at the games on screen right now, and we'll have a guess which ones of these are actually real and which ones of these ones are fake. So just to let you know that none of these on screen right now are actually legitimate games. They're all the fake copies or the bootlegs of the games, and basically is the main reason why I decided to do an update on the video from a couple years ago, because there's a lot more better fakes that are being made nowadays. So for example, in the past, maybe like 10 years ago or so, one of the first bootleg Emerald versions was this one, which is, it's obviously fake. The cartridge looks quite off, like it's quite easy to tell now, even without having to sort of see the game for yourself or anything like that. So and same with this one. So this one in my old video also sort of looked like it was one of the main ones that we sort of used to compare with, but nowadays the fakes are actually a lot better than these ones now. So if we have a look, the latest fake Emerald is actually this one, which has actually got that nice sort of holographic shiny sticker, very similar to the legitimate copies now. And these new better looking fake games are actually catching a lot of people off guard, so I thought I'd make a video just sort of showing you the differences between the newer fakes as well. Alright, so let's take a look at the external or the physical signs of the Pokemon GBA cartridges. The first step is to check the sticker. If there are any obvious differences, definitely stay clear, but sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to tell online if you're buying through looking at photos only. The second part is the cart color accuracy. So for example, if you're buying any of these GBA games, they should not be in a black cartridge. They should be in the color respective of the games, as well as being slightly opaque as well. The third thing to look out for is the logos, so they need to be clear and accurate, and the font size and the font type should also be correct. And just also be mindful that different regions, for example Australia, the US or Europe, they have different sort of stickers and logos that you need to look out for, and I'll go into more detail about that later. The fourth thing to look out for is the little indent on the top right of the sort of the case of the game. So for example, this is something that people don't really look out for as much, but if you see a little indented square just there, that little space is for batteries to be put in on these games, and yeah, they have it on the LeafGreen and FireRed versions as well. I believe it's just the mold of the case is just the same. So that's something you can look out for as well if it's a little bit hard to, but it's a little bit hard to tell. Fifth, there is a embossed factory imprint on these on all of the games. So all of the legitimate games should have like a little number or indent printed on the game. So if you just have a look here, you can see there's a 00 and an E3 just sort of printed on there. So if you do see those in the photos, that's more than likely legitimate as well. Yeah, and another sort of major thing is the fake games don't always nicely fit into the gaming console. So I've found that some of the fake games that I've sort of tested with my DS and my Game Boy SP, they go in pretty difficultly, and like there's a few of them have actually snapped a little bit, like they've made like a small crack or like a small snap sound. So that's also to sort of be mindful as well. And also if you open the circuit board, so this is if you have access to if you have a game that you want to have a look at that's yours, you can always open up the circuit board to see if there's a battery missing from the Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald versions, because they do come with batteries. The Nintendo logo on the board. So if we do look a little bit closely in here, you can't really tell. There's like a Nintendo logo with a year and a copyright sign, as well as like a serial number inside. So if you can have access to your circuit board, you want to have a look. And obviously the circuit board layout as well, which we'll go into more detail. We'll also look at the differences with the fake Mission Dungeon Red Rescue Team game as well. This is the legitimate copy, so this is one of the only games, the Pokemon games, that have the black casing around it, as well as the Pokemon Pinball game. But they generally don't make these ones as fakes because they're not I would say they're probably not as popular as sort of the main series games that we're looking at over here. Alright, so let's take a look at Pokemon Ruby versions. So the legitimate copy Australian version is this one here. So the sticker should sort of look like that red with a bit of the dark sort of edges on the side. The factory imprint is just there, if you can see the 12B E3 as well. And this is sort of what the game cartridge should look like, nice and clear, everything in the correct font. And you can see obviously a little indent we spoke about earlier for the battery, and you can see it's the opaque sort of looking case. At the back you can see the circuit board here. The main thing to look out for on the back is actually these little 4 squares here. So when you do see these 4 squares, generally speaking, that should be legitimate. If we're going to compare this with one of the fake games, obviously they do have the battery here, but the sticker isn't as good. There's no embossing sort of imprint, and the sticker is sort of like this dull plasticky look on the older fakes, as well as obviously the E is different. The Nintendo logo is quite off as well, and the Nintendo seal of quality is very, very suspicious as well. At the back, obviously you don't see that 4 squares on the circuit board, so that's something that people haven't really known much about, but yeah, that's something to look out for as well. You can see the font sort of off on the model number and the logo as well, but it's a little bit harder to tell. If we want to look at one of the better fakes, this is the better fake that they've sort of reproduced recently. It's got more of a metallic sticker when you shine it in the light, so it does look a bit more legitimate, but it's still quite off in terms of all the sort of the logos and the labels and everything, as opposed to the real one here. And just for comparison purposes, this is the European version of the legitimate copy. So there is still that embossed imprint, but sort of the positioning of where they've put everything is a little bit different. So they have the CE here as well, but everything else should match. Alright, so for Sapphire, I won't go into too much detail. It's very similar to how Ruby looked sort of like. So this is the legitimate copy. The embossing is just sort of here. It's a little bit more hidden. I can't really tell the number, but I think it's 00B and E4. So that's the Australian copy of the game. This is the legitimate US copy of the game. So very similar sticker style, except there is the E for everyone sort of rating as well, and the Nintendo seal of quality is a little bit more flattened, whereas this one's a bit more circular. Everything else is very similar, so it's got that little indent at the top here as well. You can't really tell because the cartridges are a little bit darker, but at the back you can definitely tell that oh, you can't really definitely tell, but you can tell there's a bit of the 4 squares at the side, which is a little bit harder to tell. Yeah, and if you want to compare these games with the sort of the illegitimate copy, so I'll just compare the US versions just for comparison's sake. So the illegitimate copy is a lot darker with the sticker. It is metallic, but it's the logos and the sort of the seals are a little bit different. So you can see that's a little bit more not slanted, it's a bit more sort of squished together, the text, as opposed to the legitimate one, and yeah, the logos are quite a little bit off as well. And obviously there's no battery in these ones, so that's also a big sort of difference there as well. These are the older fakes. They do have the batteries, but they don't really, you know, the sticker's sort of like an obvious giveaway with that, so no need to worry with that. Alright, so for Pokemon Emerald, which is the most common fake Pokemon game so far, these are sort of the differences. So the 2 here, this is the US version, this is Australian version of the Pokemon Emerald games. The other 3 are the fake games, but you can tell that there's quite a bit of differences between the 2 at the back and then the fake one at the front. So the fake one at the front is actually quite well made. It's got that metallic sticker and it's very, very representative of the legitimate copies of the game. So if we want to compare just the 2 US ones, just side by side, you can tell that when you hold it to the light, the sticker is it's metallic, but it doesn't have that sort of holographic feel to it with the sort of the sparkles here on the legitimate copy. They've actually done a really good job with all the logos and everything. It does actually look quite similar. So the main thing you do have to go off is probably more so the color and the texture of the sticker. Otherwise, you can tell like slightly the font is a little bit different when you compare the 2 just there like that. So yeah, and the color on this one tends to be a bit more of a yellowy green, whereas this one's more of like a crisp green, if that makes sense. So if you just can kind of tell, it's a bit more yellow down here, whereas this one is just full green. It's a little bit harder to tell in the camera, but it's a bit more easy in person. I've just labelled my games as well. So here you can see the 4 squares there, whereas there's no 4 squares at the back on this cartridge as well. So that's sort of a big thing to look out for as well, if you're able to sort of see the back of the games. This one, obviously the fake games, they've done a bit better with the stickers in terms of the placement. Sometimes the sticker is a bit off, so that's sort of easy to tell as well. The embossing is just there as well, 00E4. And yeah, so those are the main differences. With the old ones, it's a little bit, it's a lot easier to tell because the color of the stickers are off as well. So that's nothing to worry about. And the main differences between the US, UK and the Australian versions really just are the stickers. So this one's just got the E for everyone and this one doesn't. But and then the official Nintendo seal is a bit small and squished, whereas this one's more circular. So not too much difference there. It's quite easy to tell as well. Alright, so now onto FireRed and LeafGreen. So FireRed, the legitimate copies are the ones on the side. This is Australian copy and this is the US version. So if you just have a look, the main differences obviously are still the E for everyone. And that's really it. The embossed sort of numbers are just up there and just in here as well. So yeah, the font size and everything's very similar. The stickers are basically that nice yellowy orange sort of swirl, so it's quite obvious when you do compare it with the older fake, which is, you know, not even Fire at this rate, but the newer ones are actually really well made, so it is a lot harder to tell with the new fake FireRed and LeafGreen versions. There's slight subtle differences. So for example, you can see that little cutout rectangle there at the top of the legitimate cartridge, whereas the fake ones you can't see one because they don't spend enough effort making everything just really, like the fine detail, really specific. The font is still a little bit off, if you can just tell in the difference there. And just at the back, this is also just a sticker at the back, it's very similar, but you do have that, the 4 squares are a lot larger, so it is covered by the sticker, but you can see there's 4 squares there, whereas on the fake one there isn't. Yeah, so that's the main sort of differences, but you do have to watch out for the sticker because the sticker is very well made now. So you do have to sort of refer to some photos with that one in regards to the sticker. Alright, and now onto Pokemon LeafGreen. These are the legitimate copies, so there's the Australian one on the left and the US one on the right. Very similar sticker, it's got that sort of lime, yellowy green as sort of the background, and then the swirls are more like a dark green with the silver in between, so it's quite easy to tell with these ones, as opposed to the FireRed ones. Obviously the stickers and the logos and stuff are quite the same with the legitimate copies, and of course we still have that very obvious 4 squares at the back of the cartridge as well. So if you want to compare the old fake, it's very obvious. This is just sort of like a meadow with grass probably. Not very good logo, so definitely avoid anything that looks like this. But the newer fakes are a little bit better, but not as good as the FireRed fakes, because so they've got the light green backgrounds as well as with the dark green and silver swirls, but the swirls, the pattern of the swirls is quite a bit off the legitimate ones. So the legitimate ones have a bit more silver incorporated, and these ones are just a bit more like streaks, if you'd like to say it, if you'd like to call it that. So yeah, the font is obviously, not as good, but it is actually the fake games are actually pretty good with like all the copies and stuff. You can see that there's no like that indent up at the top here as well, and that's pretty much it with these ones. And another thing I mentioned earlier about the black cartridges, if you see any of the games with these black cartridges, it's pretty much especially with the Australian versions or the English copy versions, so Australian, UK and the US versions, if they have a black case, it's definitely fake. This is also a fake game that I got a really long time ago. It was a gift given by my cousin, and yeah, you can just tell that as soon as you look at it, it's like just fake. You don't see pictures of the Pokemon on it at all. The stickers definitely look like this, so that's just something to look out for as well. So the last little thing I'll just touch on is the Pokemon spin-off GBA games as well. So the Red Rescue Team legitimate copy looks like this. It is a bit more of that like glossy, plasticky kind of look of the sticker, but everything else is in the correct font and everything. And you can see the embossed sort of numbers. It does say I think 19 and E4 just there. So this is legitimate. It does have the black cartridge, which is not like the main games. Yeah, at the back the logo looks pretty legitimate and everything as well. Pinball, this is the legitimate copy as well. You can see the embossed sort of number there. I believe it says 34. And everything else looks quite clear and the logos are correct. So this one you don't have to worry as much for, because they don't really make the fake pinball games. It's too much effort to return ratio. So it's unlikely you will find one, but this is the correct reference. Now this one is the fake copy of the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon Red Rescue Team game. They don't have anything, like, it's just incorrect altogether. There's no like Nintendo seal of quality. The sticker is peeling. You know, the E is too small. The Nintendo logo is too big. There's not supposed to be a picture. It's supposed to be just sort of that nice red with the stripes. Of course, this game is not right. There's an internal battery when there shouldn't be, and so there's a lot of signs on this one that just shows it's incorrect. So in summary, we've just had a look at all of the external differences between the main series Pokemon games, such as Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, FireRed and LeafGreen. And now I've just compiled a couple photos of the differences between the real and fake games. So we've got the Australian copy and some European or US copies of the game, as well as the new fakes and the old fakes. So with Pokemon Ruby, for example, we can see that there's some clear differences between the fake copies, especially with the bad fake. It's quite obvious. And in the next photo, we also have the really big difference between the good fakes and the real game. With Pokemon Sapphire, you can see that there's the US copy, Australian copy, and the European copy, all side by side, and all in comparison to the 3 different types of fakes of Sapphire that I have. And we also have a direct comparison in terms of how the sticker or the cart should look in comparison between the 2 US copies of Pokemon Sapphire. Moving on to Pokemon Emerald, we can see that there's the 3 different regions as well. The stickers are all very similar, obviously, with the reals, but with the fakes there's clear differences between going from the sort of the brighter green colour to the darker green colour to the one in the middle, which is quite a nice fake, obviously with the sticker being quite sort of shiny holographic, similar to the one that we see on Pokemon Emerald. Now moving on to Pokemon FireRed, for example, we've got the US and the Australian versions. Obviously with the lighting it's a little bit hard to get all of the angles right in the photos, but you can see that the US and the Australian copy of the games are very similar in terms of the pattern and the style of sort of the colouring and then the that kind of, and the layout of the sort of font and everything versus the fakes. So we have 2 really bad fake ones just on the left and the right sides, down at the bottom of the picture. You can see that they're very blatantly obvious, whereas when we look at the one in the middle, it's a lot more difficult to tell, especially in the lighting and that kind of thing. It's a bit difficult to tell in terms of, you know, the swirls and that kind of thing. So it's definitely something you want to look out for. So I've just put another comparison photo just on an angle so you can see sort of in lighting what the differences really are between the real and fake US copies of the FireRed game. Moving on to the LeafGreen game, for example, we see that the US and the Australian copies are quite similar, with the lime green background and the darker green and silver swirls in between. It's a little bit more difficult to say replicate these this sort of pattern and this sort of layout. So you can see that the older fakes on the right and the newer fakes on the left are trying to obviously mimic this sort of pattern, but it hasn't really come too close, so it's not too difficult to tell the difference. Obviously with the side-by-side light sort of comparison, you can see that the swirls are a lot more sort of small and consistent in the fake game, whereas the real one, it's a lot more, you know, there's a bit more, you know, angles and the sizes of the stripes and swirls are a little bit different, or sort of a bit more dynamic, I should say. So looking at all these different pictures and stuff, you can see that the clear differences, obviously with a higher definition photo of what all of these games sort of look like when you're looking at them in photos, for example. And then part 3 and 4, we'll be looking at the internal signs, for example, in-game events or in-game differences, as well as how to look for or shop for these games will be coming up as well.